Hello and welcome. Today our guest is Alexander Grace from Red Pill Interviews. Alexander, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, there are many men who say that women have nothing to offer men in relationships. But today you wanted to talk about something that women do have to offer men.
That's right. We're already aware that one of the primary reasons that men enter into relationships is access to sex. For a lot of men who describe themselves as MGTOW, they would say that beyond that, there really isn't anything that women can provide.
Therefore, given the risks associated with entering into a relationship with a woman, having your resources or your children taken away from you, it's not worth it.
That's how the theory goes, yes. What I want to talk about today is one of the things that women do have to offer men, beyond sex, that is extremely valuable.
Are you going to try and convince men not to give up on dating women, that the rewards outweigh the risks?
No, it's not my place to say. That's up to each individual to judge for himself according to his own standards and values whether or not a relationship with a woman is worth the risk. What I am concerned about is that whatever decision men make, they do so with as much of the relevant information as possible.
Do you feel like some MGTOW men are making the decision to give up on women too rashly, without a full understanding of all of the factors involved?
No, I'm not saying that. A lot of MGTOW guys are older and they've already experienced relationships with women, often relationships that went extremely badly. So those guys are completely capable of independently judging reality and then choosing their own path.
So you're more concerned about the younger guys?
Yes. For younger men who are coming across this information but haven't necessarily had much practical experience in relationships, I'm concerned that they're hearing only about the risks without knowing what some of the potential rewards are for being in a relationship with a woman.
You mean beyond access to sex?
Yes, I think that's a major simplification. Of course, sexual intimacy can be one of the most rewarding aspects of a romantic relationship, but to say that beyond sex there isn't anything that a woman can offer a man is to miss some of the most important ways that a woman can enrich a man's life.
So you believe that there are a large number of rewards for a man in a relationship with a woman?
Yes, though for today's discussion I just want to focus on one of the benefits. That's emotional intimacy and vulnerability.
Are you sure that's a positive thing? People hate being vulnerable.
People only hate to be vulnerable when the person that they expose themselves to rejects them. Then it's a horrible experience where your vulnerability turns into hate, anger, and shame.
So are you saying that there's a positive experience of vulnerability?
Yes. When you're vulnerable to another person and they treat that vulnerability with love, care, and kindness, then it's an extremely pleasurable experience.
But for young guys who haven't been in a romantic relationship before, how do they know it's true?
You don't only experience this in romantic relationships. Everybody will have experienced it at some point in their lives.
Can you give us an example?
Okay, well let's go back to childhood. Let's imagine that you've done something extremely naughty and you're confident that your parents are going to be really angry at you. So you're feeling extremely vulnerable when you confess your misbehavior. Now imagine that instead of being angry with you, your parents treat your vulnerability and your confession with love, care, and kindness. Well, what could be a better experience than that?
Aren't you just talking about the pleasure of receiving a parent's love?
It's so much deeper than that. What makes the experience special is the vulnerability. When you made your confession, you were terrified. You felt ashamed, and yet you still risked exposing yourself. What makes you so vulnerable in that moment is that you've given so much of your power over to your parents.
So, by exposing your vulnerability, you've given your power away to your parents.
That's right. In that moment, if they criticize or condemn you, you will feel utterly crushed and ashamed of yourself. But if they treat you with understanding and love, then it will be an intensely pleasurable experience.
I can see how this works, but it seems very specific to the parent-child dynamic, because parents are moral authority figures that you're dependent upon. Does this principle have application in relationships outside of the parent-child dynamic?
Definitely. You can see it with little children when they tell each other secrets. What they're doing is chasing pleasure by experimenting with vulnerability.
How does it work with children?
Well, if you've got two friends and one of them shares a secret, what they're hoping is that the other friend is going to handle that secret with love and care and respect their privacy. Maybe it's a secret that's very personal, or they're embarrassed about it, they've got a lot of shame.
So they tell their secret to a friend, hoping that the friend will treat it with kindness and respect and not share it with others.
That's right. Secrets are how children experiment with intimacy and learn the emotional skills that they're going to need in their adult relationships later in life. Long before they're emotionally mature enough to have boyfriends, young girls will tell each other secrets just as an experiment to see how deep they can push their intimacy. Young boys often do the same.
But so often those experiences end in disaster. Their best friend becomes their enemy who shares all of their secrets with everyone. Their intimacy is destroyed and they're shamed and humiliated.
It happens all the time, and the experience is emotionally devastating. And yet, that same child will find a new best friend to share new secrets with and repeat the whole process over again.
Why would they do that when it ended so badly for them last time?
Because the pleasure that they experience when exposing their vulnerability goes well is so intense that even though there can be horrific consequences if it goes badly, it's still worth the risk.
And this is something that happens with adults as well.
All the time. Most people know a couple who breaks up or gets divorced, and then one person starts sharing all the intimate details and secrets of their former partner.
It's so terrible when that happens. I can only imagine a bad experience like that could be enough to turn you off the idea of relationships altogether.
Perhaps that's what caused some men to go MGTOW. They looked at the potential consequences of exposing yourself vulnerably to a woman and just thought the reward isn't worth the risk. If they've had bad experiences or seen sufficiently bad female behaviour, then this decision could even be a rational one.
But I don't understand what this has to do with romantic relationships. I get what you're saying, that being emotionally vulnerable with someone can be very rewarding, but I don't understand why it has to be with a woman that you're dating.
It doesn't. You can find emotional intimacy and experiment with vulnerability in any relationship. In fact, this is one of the things that makes therapy so powerful. See, with a therapist, you can express your deepest fears and expose your most shameful vulnerabilities, and you can be guaranteed a kind and respectful response. A therapist isn't going to criticize or shame you because you're paying them.
But that's a very unique and specific relationship. That's seeing a professional. Can't you just talk to your friends about this?
You can, and you absolutely should. A lot of the problems that men face in modern society could be helped if men learned how to share openly with each other. In his fantastic book, The Way of the Superior Man, David Deida explains how important it is to have strong male friendships with people that you admire and who can give you honest feedback about your life.
I think he even recommends forming specific men's groups to facilitate that kind of discussion.
That's right. A space where guys can talk about their struggles and their passions with other guys who can listen and give advice. It's a great place to experiment with emotional vulnerability because it's safe and supportive.
In a way, isn't that what the Red Pill subreddit is for? Sharing ideas and experiences with other guys and getting feedback?
It is, and it serves an important function. For anyone who hasn't been to the Red Pill subreddit, we can put a link in the description box below and they can check it out. It is important to remember though that it is the internet, and even if the guys have good intentions, often because of the anonymity, they can devolve into trolling or just shaming other guys rather than giving constructive advice.
I think this is one of the main reasons why a lot of guys are scared to talk to their male friends and to be vulnerable, in case they're teased or made fun of.
That's right, and one of the reasons why so many men come to the internet to discuss their problems is because there is some safety in that anonymity. There are probably people who come to this channel and are watching this video right now because this sort of stuff interests them, but they don't really feel they can talk about it with their friends.
But is it really necessary? I understand that it might be pleasurable to be vulnerable to someone and have them receive it with care and kindness, but is it really a necessity or is it more of a luxury?
I believe that the kind of emotional intimacy that's fostered by vulnerability is a psychological necessity. If a man can't find it amongst his male friends, maybe because they're acting all tough and masculine and they call him a pussy anytime he talks about his feelings, that's when he runs into the danger of losing himself in a romantic relationship with a woman.
Are you saying that he's going to try and meet all of his emotional needs through a romantic relationship with a woman?
That's right, and it's not a good idea. If you've been starved for emotional intimacy throughout your life, and you finally find a woman who's kind to you, who listens to you, who you can be vulnerable to, well then you run a very real danger of becoming dependent upon her. That's when you stop seeing your friends, you give up all of your hobbies, all because she's the only person who can satisfy your craving for emotional intimacy.
And what danger is there in that? If she's meeting your needs, what's the problem?
It's never wise to become overly dependent on one person. You give up control and start acting clingy and needy. These are unattractive traits, and if you don't get a grip on yourself, then she's going to become overwhelmed and move on to someone else.
But that seems unfair. Just because you wanted to expand your emotional intimacy with someone and experiment with vulnerability, why should they lose attraction for you and run off with someone else?
There's no point moralizing about this. Whether it's right or wrong, that's irrelevant. What's important to know is that it happens. People aren't attracted to behavior that's needy and clingy. Now, why that is, that's a big topic, and it's one we can cover in a future video. But what I want to say now is that it's important that men cultivate strong emotional bonds with their male friends, because that's the best protection you have against becoming overly dependent on your female partner.
But it seems like the real takeaway from what you've said is that you can't open up to a woman and be emotional, or else she's going to lose attraction for you.
There are some within the Red Pill community who would say that it is always a bad idea to share your emotions, that it's guaranteed to make her lose attraction to you. Now, I will be doing a full video at some point on when and how it is appropriate to share your feelings, but the solution is definitely not as simple as just never share your emotions.
I guess if someone never shared their emotions with their partner, then they would miss out on the experience that we've talked about today, of being emotionally vulnerable to someone and having that vulnerability received with love, kindness and care, and all the pleasure that that experience brings.
That's right, though they would still be free to seek it in other relationships, like with friends or family.
But if it is possible to have this experience outside of a romantic relationship, why should men seek out romantic relationships at all?
Well, some men don't. They go MGTOW and proactively get their needs met by other means.
And does that work?
If you ask them, they'll tell you that it's possible to have a meaningful and fulfilling life without a relationship with a woman. There is, however, a unique experience of vulnerability that's really only possible to explore inside a romantic relationship.
And what is that?
It's when you're vulnerable with your masculinity. Seeing a woman respond to your masculine energy purely from her femininity is an experience unique to the romantic relationship.
Are you talking about something sexual?
Often it is sexual, because it's in the sexual act that the feminine and the masculine energies are most heavily polarized. When you're engaging with sex with a woman, you give her a lot of power to validate you as a man. Can you satisfy her? Are you desirable? Are your sexual preferences and fantasies normal and acceptable? These questions express a deep vulnerability.
What do you mean, are your sexual desires normal and acceptable?
One of the most common experiences in experimenting with vulnerability is opening up to a partner about a specific sexual preference that you have. If it's something you're embarrassed about or ashamed of, then expressing that sexual desire makes you extremely vulnerable to that person.
Because that person has the power to validate your sexuality as normal and healthy, or as something weird and shameful.
Exactly. If they call you a creep or a pervert, then you're going to be extremely hurt. But what could be more pleasurable than opening up about the deepest parts of your sexuality and have it be enthusiastically received by your partner? Not only do they not judge you, but they're excited to try it out.
But doesn't this just confirm what we talked about earlier? That the only thing women have to offer men is sex?
No, that was just one example. You can open up to your partner about all kinds of things, and there are lots of things that are just better explored with a woman.
Like what sort of things?
Like your fun, playful side. You can make jokes with your male friends, but you can't really run around the house acting like a little kid, giggling, tickling, doing dumb stuff like that. A lot of those activities require the element of touch, sometimes sexual, but sometimes just playful. So exposing that childlike part of yourself, the part that's not really rational or logical, is an intensely vulnerable experience, and it's best shared with a romantic partner.
So then, what would you say to the guys who have given up on dating? The MGTOW men who say that this kind of experience is not important and that women are unnecessary.
That's a common misconception about MGTOW. I don't think that they deny that there are positive experiences that you could have with a woman. I think that they just look at the risk to reward ratio and decide that whatever pleasure they could obtain from a relationship just isn't worth it.
Do you agree with them?
It's not my place to say. Every man has to make that decision for himself. But I think that it's important that if a man does decide to go MGTOW and completely give up on dating women, he does so with full knowledge of what it is that he's giving up.
You mean the pleasure of being vulnerable to someone and having it well received?
In this instance, yes, though there are many other benefits to having a romantic relationship, and we'll cover those in future videos. There are also a huge number of risks and potential negative consequences, and we'll cover those topics as well.
But what would you say to a man who claims that he has no desire to be emotionally vulnerable with someone? That sharing your feelings is only for the weak?
I would say that there is nothing weak about admitting that you have emotional needs and looking for ways to have them fulfilled. I would say that attempting emotional vulnerability with another human being is a sign of courage, and that there's nothing weak about being honest with yourself about what you need.
But isn't needing other people a sign of weakness? Shouldn't we evolve past the point of needing other people?
I think that independence is a worthy goal to shoot for, and the less validation you need from other people, the better. However, I think those people who say that having feelings and wanting to share them with other people is weakness are fooling themselves.
So you're saying that they haven't evolved past their feelings, that they're just repressing them and pretending that they don't exist?
That's right, and emotional repression has potentially devastating consequences, though that's a big topic and we'll save that for a future video. What is important to know is that one of the major reasons why men continue to seek out relationships with women is because they're chasing the pleasure of exposing themselves and being vulnerable to a woman, and then having their vulnerabilities treated with love, care, and kindness.
I suppose one of the biggest risks is that you'll expose yourself and be vulnerable to the wrong woman, and rather than be treated with love and kindness, she'll just laugh at you or criticize you.
This is a major danger, and it happens all the time. That's why one of the most important choices you'll ever make in your life is your choice of partner. And I'll be doing a number of videos in the future on how to make sure you find the right partner and how to conduct yourself inside a relationship to make sure that you always be loved and respected.
Well, I look forward to those videos in the future. Right now, I'm interested in hearing what you guys have to say. Do you think there is a huge reward when you share your emotional vulnerabilities with a partner and it's well received, and a huge risk when you share your emotional vulnerabilities and it's not well received? Do you think that it's important that men protect themselves from becoming too dependent on one woman by increasing the emotional intimacy of their male friendships? Let us know in the comment section below.
It's one of my favorite things to do, is to log on after I've uploaded a video and read through the comment section and engage with the audience. I'm starting to recognize the names of some of my biggest fans, and it's always wonderful to see you guys pop up again in the comments week after week. Be sure to hit that like button and make sure you've subscribed to the channel. If you feel like you want to support the creator, please check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description box below.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you again next time.